my why wasn't to accumulate things, right? To have a house, to a fancy house or a lot of cars, it was my why was more about the impact that I could have on others. It makes me feel successful when I have great interactions with somebody every day, right? It changed how I measure success ultimately. And so people are always waiting to be happy when they achieve some form of success. Well, for me, instead of having success be this long-term huge thing, it became a daily thing. Hey, was I the best possible dad today, right? Did I show up how my kids needed me for them? My partner, was I a good partner today? Right? Did I listen? Did I care? Did I make other people feel good? That people that I love? Did I achieve my goals in every interaction today?
Welcome to Midliferemix, the podcast that explores midlife transitions and how people have reshaped their careers and lives to focus on what truly matters. I'm Steven Miyao, a coach who helps guide professionals through these often challenging but rewarding pivots. Each episode wraps up with an inspiring exercise to help you turn insights into action and move forward on your journey. Today, I'm excited to be joined with someone who embodies what it means to take control of your narrative, Dr. Guillermo Castillo. Guillermo is a physician and the author of Bumpy Path to Freedom, 90 Principles to Achieving Life Success. In a bold move, Guillermo pivoted away from the standard fee-for-service physician life, choosing instead to design his life on his terms. So in your book, you talk about your pivot that you've made, the initial pivot that you've made away from the physician life or the traditional physician life. Can you talk about that time and what transpired?
Yeah, absolutely, Steven. So thank you for having me. That day I'll never forget, right? It was, I think all these experiences and pressures and stressors came to a point. I had to sacrifice a lot of things that I enjoyed, which was to really spend time with my patients, right? To really care about people, to really deliver the best service available, to deliver the best in me to people on every day required me to be at my best. But yet I was living and working in a world where it was impossible because I was forced to be on call 24/7. So I never got great sleep. Right. Because of that, right. We all know from lack of sleep, you make bad decisions. Obviously, you're not eating well. You don't have time to work on yourself as much. You don't have time to read. You don't have time to meditate. You don't have time. Sometimes you don't have time for the people that you love. And so it was like a culmination of all those things that I was like, you know what? I cannot tolerate this life anymore. If I'm going to have longevity, if I'm going to live the life that I want to live, I have to start living true to my values. And this is not it.
And then what did you decide to do instead?
So I basically went to the hospitals where I was working, and I quit. And I told them, I said, I'm done today. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to do the next day. I just knew I couldn't do that anymore. So the very next day, I was like, how do I start working on myself? How do I become better? What would lead me down a path to be able to create that life that I really want, right? That I know I deserve. And then it was like a process of trying to figure that out. It wasn't so clear right away. I just knew that tolerance of the previous years of my life was no longer my path.
So essentially you hit rock bottom and then you decided to shift your life by leaning into life, figuring out what it is that's important to you. And then over time, becoming the person that you are today in having various enterprises that are able to very well sustain you. You're, financially a success, your, personal success, your success with your patients. Talk a little bit about what this life now looks like, because I think it's a very non-traditional life and it enables you to live the way you want to live, which is really inspiring to me.
So I started working on myself and said, well, what truly would make me or would align with my morals and my goals and would make me the person that I believe that I know that I am. Mm-hmm. All those lessons that I learned in those experiences that I didn't appreciate in the moment because I was so overwhelmed. Right. And then seeing where my values and where my really more than my values, where my value to the world could be. So what did I learn through going through all these experiences and then trying to use those lessons to now help others, to leverage those to help other people. So that meant not traditional medicine, right? So then I was like, well, I'm very well trained in nutrition and preventive health, which is my background. So I started a concierge practice where I was doing that. I was taking private clients and I was guiding them down a path to prevent all that disease that I was treating for so many years. And that grew slowly but surely. And as I developed those skills more and I continued to improve myself, um, I started getting more and more opportunities. I made it a goal myself to help. I think the first year that I decided to do that, I said, I want to help at least 10 other people reach their goals or live to their potential, or at least start down a path of a dream that they want to achieve. So I started writing them down. And after the first year, I think I had 12. The second year, I think I had about 30. And then it's been exponential since. I didn't advertise it. I just put it out there to the universe, right? I want to help as many people as I possibly can to change their life in a positive manner. So now there's so many different businesses coming that are more focused on helping people live better lives and preventing disease and living longer. But because that's been my passion so now I help a lot of other businesses in this field be successful and create programs that address the population they want to help. And because I'm helping people live their goals, it's helped me do really well.
Excellent. I think that this pivot that you've made and that a lot of people are trying or thinking about in midlife, there's a lot of self-doubt that goes along with that. Yeah, especially when you're considering big changes like switching your career or redefining your goals, as you've talked about. From your experience, how did you manage self-doubt and what lessons can midlife professionals take from your journey when you feel uncertain about the next steps in life?
That's a great question because, I still go through it every day. It's not that there's no doubt ever, right? There can be some people, if you're a person of faith, they say there can't be any faith without doubt. Of course, it was always doubt, especially in the beginning, it was more so. But because in my history and since I was young, it was more about developing resilience, right? And you do that through getting up every day and achieving those simple little goals, persevering through the struggles and setting small goals every day to improve. Uh, that gets me through that. I know now, based on my experiences and the tough times that I've gone through, what I'm capable of. Right. So when you think about how far you've come, and I think most people have this. So I think we don't give ourselves credit for those strengths and that resilience. So when I think about when I'm having doubts, I'm like, look, have I been in these type of situations before? Right? Yes, of course. Right? Even worse, this particular circumstance may be a little new, but the underlying issue is very similar to something I've gone through before. And that immediately gives me some confidence.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced in childhood that maybe prepared you for being able to deal with self-doubt?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in a farmland, right? Farmers, uneducated farmers who came, immigrants from Mexico. I was the first one in my community who actually was bilingual. So I had to do a lot of the translating for the members of my community with the boss who owned the land, who most of the people in my family and community worked for. So I had to overcome some of these challenges, meaning that I had to learn a language that nobody around me spoke, right? And then I had to use that to support my community. Then as we went in, we started taking standardized testings right to advance. And I remember doing an aptitude test in high school. What type of career should you go into? And they told me that I should be a farmer and lemon picker, right? That's what I was most well geared for. That's not what I wanted, right? My family had told me, hey, you have opportunity to do something different, right? I believed that I was capable and I knew that I was destined for something a little bit more than that. How could I have more impact? But I had to overcome this, right? And then when I was in college and I was applying to medical schools, my counselor told me too, she's like, your grade point average isn't great. It's okay. It's not that competitive, but I don't think you'll get into a US medical school. But because I was so resilient, right? And I was like so determined, I applied and then I got into schools here and I was like, look, I could do it. Right. But along the way, there was all these circumstances that just were against me. I felt like so many people tried to deter me. Right. Even once I was in residency, I was never really cut out for falling in line and following directions and being led. Right. And traditional medicine was I'll be looking back, I'm like, there was so many obstacles that I had to get through, so much resistance because I just didn't quite fit the mold. That's what it felt like. I was able to get through them, right? Because I knew somehow, right? I knew that in order to achieve what I wanted to do, I needed to move past that. And it wasn't about them. It wasn't truly me. It was about developing whatever I needed to become to get here. And looking back, yes, did I choose a career first that wasn't in line with the life I wanted to live? Yeah, absolutely. But also looking back, had I not have all those experiences, had I not had all that education, I wouldn't be as valuable as I am now. I got accepted on the spot at like University of Chicago, medical school, Penn State, which is good. And then very last minute, I got accepted to USC here in California. And since I grew up here, speaking to my parents and it was a good school. They were like, it'd be good to stay in California.
You emphasize the importance of continuous learning, right? And the curiosity that comes with that. And for someone in midlife who feels stuck or, plateaued maybe, how can they reignite that curiosity and adopt to new opportunities later in life?
Yeah, man, I think it's really great to tap into your love of whatever the topic is. For me, since I was a child, because I grew up in a nutritionally challenged environment, I was chubby and overweight, and although I was very athletic, I was still not in great shape. I had this passion for learning about nutrition and how to be well nutritionally, right, metabolically optimal from when I was young. So when I went to school, that's actually what I studied. So I think going back to something that you love and then having that curiosity to read and go and chase. I go down these crazy rabbit holes sometimes and I learn all these incredible things that, in the moment maybe don't seem so relevant, but later they all come together. And now because you pursued all that knowledge, you're able to help other people. And I think that's something that we forget, right? Because we're so busy with having children or whatever it is your work. You don't have enough to get enough sleep. I remember many days where I didn't have enough time. They're like, people, do you read? I was like, no, I don't have time to read. So at some point, right, it's about making the time because when I find time, you're never going to find time, right? If you wait for it to come. So for me, it was like, hey, how do I make time? And then as you develop that curiosity more and more, then like you said, you really start having that passion. Then you're like, hey, this is something I love doing. How do I use this to help others? And that's really changed my life.
So, of course, your book is a great read for anyone in midlife that is trying to further educate themselves on this path. Are there other books or podcasts that you would recommend that people could read or listen to that will be helpful in this transition?
One of the ones that really changed my perspective on everything is Simon Sinek book. I'm sure you're familiar with, Find Your Why. I think it's when you're in the midst of all these stressors and, like I said, trying to figure out how to feed your family and pay your bills, and you forget why you do all these things. Right. So for me, that was a book that really changed my perspective on what I was doing, why I was doing what I was doing. It gave me the strength to really pursue a deeper why.
Do you have a reflection process that you use on a daily basis to be able to remind yourself of these?
Yeah. So every night I go over my next day's schedule, right, or what I'm planning to do or what the interaction I'm trying to have, and then I decide how I'm going to show up, right? What I need, what I believe I'm needed, how I'm needed to show up, and what I'm going to deliver. And then at the end of every night before I go to sleep, right, and then I meditate and I go through this and I see myself doing it. And at the end of the night, I go back through that list and I see if I have accomplished it. And I was like, and it's not always 100%, but it's always pretty good, right? I'm always 70, 80%. I'm like, oh, I showed up, 80% of the time today. I did everything I was supposed to do. And I showed up in the manner that I was needed. And then I see day to day. Some days it's not as good. Some days it's really good. Some days it's 100%. but I give myself a little bit of grace, and then I say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to be better, and that's
Yeah,
my challenge every day.
there are a lot of great lessons in that. I think a lot of successful people are journaling and doing this reflection every night. You also talked about meditation, how that's an important part of recentering yourself every day, and also being kind to yourself, right? So you don't expect yourself to be 100% every day, but you can see that predominantly you're doing a good job at the things that you want to do, which are based on your why. I think that's very powerful. In your book, you also talk about humility as one of the key principles to achieving success. Tell me how you balance humility with the ambition and confidence to pursue new ventures or new roles.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Because humility to me is not about making yourself less than. It's for me, humility is more about acknowledging that other people are maybe different but equal, right? And that I have something to learn from everybody that I encounter. So because I look at that every day as a collaboration, so I get opportunities almost every day. People call me now, which is pretty awesome, right? That they need help, but they think that based on my specific skill set and knowledge that they could use my help.
In midlife often comes with relationship shifts, right? So family, friendships, professional networks. Yeah, our parents are aging. We have to take care of them. Our kids are still in the house or leaving the house soon. And so that creates a lot of turmoil. How have your relationships impacted your journey? And what advice would you give to those in midlife about building or maintaining meaningful relationships during career transitions or, any transitions really?
I think the hardest part about relationships as you're doing this is that the people that are really close to you sometimes, right, as you're trying to make these decisions, and you're trying to shift or pivot, may not understand what you're doing or why you're doing it. For example, when I was leaving traditional medicine and I was making a pretty good living, so I was making good money, and my own mother and the people close to me are like, "You're crazy. What are you doing? Like, why would you leave that? Right? What are you gonna do? I don't know. Are you gonna make money? I don't know." And but they didn't understand the bigger vision, right? All I could tell them is like, "Look, there's no future there." But because of that, my relationships were challenged a bit with the people that were closest because they just couldn't see where I was headed, and they thought I was making a huge mistake. So that's probably the biggest issue when you're doing this initially is, and then you find yourself, most people will find themselves trying to convince or defend their stance or why they're doing what they're doing. And so you waste a lot of energy doing it. And sometimes it's good. Everybody who's listening to that, I mean, the biggest thing for me is like, hey, it doesn't matter people who doesn't believe or why. Nobody has to believe in you but you, ultimately, right? All those people that are close to you that love you and that they come around eventually, right? They see and they're like, "Oh, you're doing it." Now they're like, "Oh, you're doing great. That was the best thing you ever did." And then there's going to be some friends who will just leave, right? People who you thought were close who just kind of leave because as you evolve your mentality, you change, and because when you do this, right, when you make this change, your inner energy, your positivity and energy you exude changes because you start being aligned with yourself morally. You're so happy, like everything else, like the vibration that you exude is different, right? And that repels certain people. But sometimes letting go can be hurtful because you're like, wow, I thought those people were my friends, or I thought those people cared. It's not that they don't, it's just that they feel uncomfortable, right? When you're doing shining, you do it. Sometimes people's insecurities seem a little bit more outstanding or more prevalent, and that makes them feel uncomfortable. And we have to understand it's not about us. All those relationships will be strained as you go through this because they're not going to understand. Eventually, they get stronger, right? Because as you develop that inner strength and you feel much better about yourself, you're able to be a better partner to them, a better dad, a better son, and when they see that love and that energy grow, it just brings them even closer. So now I have much deeper connections with the people that I have.
how do you balance taking feedback, constructive feedback on that journey, right? With cutting out people or distancing yourself from people that provide you with negative thoughts or negative advice.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good one too. So setting boundaries, right? Like, yeah, this is where it's okay to talk. I'm able to accept everything to hear. And then that's also on us or that individual to decide the value of those people, right? And you have to kind of put them in different boxes and then set boundaries for that. I heard some statistics say now that most Americans say that they only have one or two really good friends. And I used to believe that as well, but it wasn't that. The problem was that it was my fault, right? Because I just wasn't developing those friendships. It's like anything else, any relationship, you have to work and develop it, right? So if it's important to you, you spend the time, you have to spend some time face to face, you have to do things on a daily basis to develop, like, kind of like with your wife, partner, you have to develop it every single day or it does fade, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also an important lesson to cherish your relationships, to build on those relationships and to invest in those relationships is very important. I think specifically amongst males, I think women are much better at doing that than we are. And but then also knowing when it's time for that relationship to end. Not every relationship has to be forever, right? It served you at this point, and now it's no longer serving you, and you need to move on, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you have to hold grudges. You're just moving on,
yeah,
and that gives you then space for other more positive relationships in your life that help you and support you when you need it.
absolutely true. I think it's probably important that you brought up before is, in the midst of all this, it's hard to find just something that people talk about all the time is balance. You spend time with your kid, your dad, your partner, your this, you have all these, but you oversee all these businesses. I'm like, look, when you're truly acting out of love, right? And when you only work with people that you love to work with, when you are only dealing with situations that you love to be involved in, when you pick all those, and you handpick all those things and you prioritize yourself, right? So you have your time set aside for your self-care. If you're not at your best, you can't be your best for anybody else. Number one, you got to be at your best, right? And then the rest of it balances itself out because you love it so much, you never feel like you're sacrificing anything, right? Because when we do spend time, I give her all of it, right? And I think if you approach it that way, then you're not stressing about, hey, am I really balancing out my time? It's almost impossible to go through and be like, oh, let me tally it up and see if I'm balancing my time.
I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier about the why, right? So it's important to define why you're doing what you're doing, and that, as you said, you prioritize it based on your why. And then once you do that, it's easy because you're no longer doing things that you don't want to do. You're no longer doing things that for the wrong reasons. You're doing it for the right reasons. I think you've done this in many ways very well, and I admire you for all of those steps that you've taken on that path or continue to take on that path, right? Guillermo, thank you for your time. It was very insightful, as all of our conversations always are.
I appreciate that, Steven. I'd love to come back and thank you again.
Guillermo reminds us that success isn't just a distant goal. It's aligning our daily actions with our why. But first, we must discover what truly matters to us. Take a moment to picture your funeral years from now. What do you want people remembering about you? What impact did you make? Write a few lines as if delivering your eulogy. Reflect on your values, the legacy you want to leave, and the qualities you want others to remember. Now, look for recurring themes in what you wrote. These reveal your core values, what truly mattered. Once you've identified these, try crafting a simple statement. This why statement can guide your choices, aligning you with your true purpose. Thank you for tuning in to Midlife Remix. See you next time.